draft.
Can you explain that to me?
Volunteering for the draft saved the draft board from drafting us, but it also gave us first choice in getting on the list, so that we could actually go to Vietnam together with, there was 2 other fellows with me that went. So we had that opportunity to do that by volunteering for the draft.
So, you were living in Winstead at that time?
Mm-hmm.
And who did you, what other 2 fellas signed up with you, and do you recall the date?
The actual date I don't recall, but Paul Beccari and Joe Gadenzi were the other 2 fellas, and by volunteering for the draft, we all went in together, served together in basic training and advanced training, and then to Vietnam together, and then split up in Vietnam.
Wow. Were the 3 of you friends growing up?
Yes.
So how did you all decide, when did you make this decision you were all going to join together?
Well, it was kind of a surprise to me. I wasn't anticipating it. I was anticipating the draft, but Paul and Joe had previously during that day gone and signed up for the draft. And then I was in the pool hall in Winstead biding my time, and they came in and told me what they had done and asked me if I wanted to go in with them. So I says, well, might as well. I'm just going to get drafted anyway. So they took me back to Torrington with them, and I signed up with them right on the same list. So we all went through everything together.
Wow. What year was it?
That was 1968, I believe. Yep.
After you signed up, how long before you were actually inducted?
Not too long, because I believe I enlisted, my official time was in February 1968, so it was in 68, so it had to be just a couple of months actually.
And where did you go for your basic training?
Fort Dix, New Jersey.
How long did you stay there?
Our basic tour was, I think, 3 months or 90 days, something like that.
And what was your basic training like?
Well, it was rather difficult for me, being a heavy individual. I was 220 pounds and out of high school, and not a very active individual, so the physical part was difficult. But the training, of course, was not exceedingly difficult. I was with thousands of other troops going through the same thing, which made the task a little bit easier.
Now, did you stay with your 2 friends, Paul and Joe, throughout basic training?
Yes. Yeah,
You said you were actually in the same barracks?
We were in
and
the
everything?
same barracks, right across, rooms across from each other. Yeah.
So that must have made basic a little bit more bearable for you.
Oh, that was like just being in town, except we were in the Army, you know, and being harassed at the same time, you know.
Did you have a graduation from basic training?
Yes.
And what did you do after the graduation?
We had a period of leave time, and before we were to report to our next duty station, which was Fort Polk, Louisiana, for advanced infantry training.
So did you have a chance to go home to Winstead, Connecticut?
Yes.
Leave?
Yeah.
How long did you have?
I'm going to guess approximately a month, something like that.
Did the 3 of you report together to Fort Polk?
Yes, we did. Yeah, we all.
So actually, the 3 of you came home on leave together?
Yeah.
So what did you do in that month of leave at home?
Well, let's see. We were 21, and
No, I know what you did.
We just basically enjoyed our lives together. And our family, of course.
At Fort Polk, how long was your advanced training?
Another 90-day period there.
Now, what was advanced training? What additional things did they teach you?
Well, advanced infantry training, getting into previews of Vietnam, and more weaponry training, and like that, basically like that.
In advanced infantry training, so you knew you were going in as an infantryman. You knew you were going to be a grunt. Did you, at that time, realize that you're probably going to Vietnam?
We were very optimistic about that, yeah. We probably knew we were definitely going to go to that, yeah. Fort Polk was a training base for Vietnam, soldiers.
Do you recall any of your instructors?
Not by name, not by their real names anyways.
Do you recall anything about any of them?
Just as the drill instructors are, rather abrupt and callous, It's just difficult. Their job was difficult, and they were just part of the training, I think it was just to make it as difficult for you as a test, to see your endurance, and if you could go through the whole thing,
Do you have any memorable experiences from either basic training or your advanced infantry training?
Memorable experiences in what way?
Well, any incidents that happened or anything unusual or any funny things?
Well, as far as funny things go, we always try to make the best of all occasions. Joe and Paul love to pick on me for whatever reason, so I became the object of their games at many times. But I would manage to get even with them, but nothing out of the ordinary. Just typical friends doing things to friends.
Where did you go after your advanced training?
Then we came home for another period of leave, which I believe was about a month, and then we flew to Fort Lewis, Washington, to our flight. Next would be Vietnam.
So you knew it, and had you received orders to go to Vietnam? So when
We
you
did.
came home, you knew.
Yeah, we knew we were going to Vietnam.
What were your feelings? Did you know exactly what you were going into at Vietnam?
Not really, We spent a week in Fort Lewis, or Fort Polk, in what they called Tigerland, which was a pre-Vietnam training week. And in my particular case, I had the opportunity to pull KP our first day there, which lasted the entire week. So I literally had no training in Tigerland.
Except in KP.
Except in KP. And got my certificate of completion in Tigerland. And went to Vietnam without that experience of Tigerland in Fort Polk. Although the good thing was it rained for 5 days in Louisiana, so I didn't really miss anything anyway, so.
When you left Fort Lewis and went right to Vietnam, how did you go? Commercial airlines or military?
It was let's see, that was a military transport, but it was a big plane, like a C-141.
Did you go as a member of a whole unit, or were you all going individually as replacements?
All individuals, although there was many guys that did come from our company in Louisiana, but they also came from other areas, other companies too. So, but Paul, Joe, and I all were on the same plane together.
And you went directly to Vietnam?
We went directly, well, we actually stopped in Alaska on our way over, and then to Vietnam.
Where did you land in Vietnam?
We landed in Cam Ranh Bay.
Do you recall your first impression of being in country?
Yeah, was as we were flying over Cam Ranh Bay, there was a small lake with a sunken plane at the bottom, which was plainly visible from the air. And once we landed, the initial blast of heat from Vietnam was our first signal of the oncoming endurance that we had to go through. But basically, just the temperature was the shock. And
do you remember what date, or at least what month and year?
when we got there?
Yes.
Yes, it was July 20, well, it was maybe 28th, 1968.
After landing, where did you go?
We were processed into Cam Ranh Bay and given a place to drop our duffel bags and get jungle fatigues and basically a holding area for troops to be dispersed throughout the country. So we basically waited until our name was called to be dispersed into whatever area we're going.
Now, is this where the three of you Winstead guys got split up?
Mm-hmm.
So, all three of you got called to go to a different place?
Yep.
And where were you called to go?
I was called to go to the LZ Bronco, which was in Duc Pho, was the brigade headquarters for 11th Infantry Brigade.
Did you three friends know that probably when you got to Vietnam you would be split up, or were you hoping that you were going to stay together the whole time?
Well, we were hoping, obviously, to stay together, but it really didn't stop us too much from being split up because we always mailed each other.
So even though you were in three different places in country, you kept in touch?
Yeah, once we wrote home initially and got the addresses of where our other buddies were. Of course, then we started writing them and wrote to them, obviously, quite often.
So at Duc Pho, what were your duties?
Well, I was there for approximately 3 days, waiting to go into the field because the company that I was assigned to, which was a recon platoon, was out in the field. So I was there approximately 3 days before I had actually got to go out with these guys. So. And when you're there, you get issued your weapon and kind of oriented a little bit to the area, you know.
What were the duties of a recon platoon?
We observed enemy troop movements, and sometimes we would spend nights on top of mountains observing North Vietnamese Army or Viet Cong moving, carrying supplies and calling artillery and try to disrupt their movements and obviously eliminate the enemy. And when we weren't doing that, we'd be pulling night ambushes, obviously finding these troop movements and calculating spots to pull an ambush, but it would be at night. And then we'd also assist line companies on different maneuvers sometimes too, where there'd be a big battalion movement and line companies would sweep an area and we'd be up into a hillside observing and trying to make judgment on what's going on or any troops coming into the area, enemy troops coming into the area.
How big was your platoon?
It varied up to 20 guys. We were 16 to 20 men.
So normally you would go out with 16 to 20 men on any given mission.
Mm-hmm.
And where were you located? I know you told me before you were up in I Corps.
Yeah,
Would you stay right around Duck Fall, or were you taken to other areas?
we would be flown into different landing zones for resupply, or work from different landing zones for observation purposes. Intelligence would come back to us and get reports of troop movement in certain areas, and then they would fly us. 3 helicopters would pick us up and fly us into areas that were close to this designated place to be observed, and we would land there and go into the areas and try to make reports on troop movement and pull ambushes and things like that. You know.
What was your specific job as part of the platoon?
I was a basic rifleman. I carried an M16.
What can you tell me about the M16?
Well, it was basically my friend, you know. I loved it. It was, although I hadn't fired it for 3 months when I first got it, and it was brand new, and it jammed on me. But fortunately, it jammed on me when a water buffalo came towards me, and a little Vietnamese kid like that with a little whip beat off the water buffalo was 10 times the size that he was, which saved me, you know. But that was my first experience with my M16, was a water buffalo.
How long were you with that recon platoon?
Approximately 7 months.
Oh, so you were with them for a good deal of your tour of duty.
Mm-hmm.
Can you describe a couple of the missions that you went on with that recon platoon? Do you remember any specific operations?
Most of them were high anxiety type things. Being a small group of troops, we didn't take a lot of chances working the lowlands, so we walked mountains a lot. And pulling night ambushes were really basically scary, you know. You worked at night, and then it was the anticipation of the enemy coming towards you, you know, and you going ahead and performing this ambush, which became quite frightening, you know. So, and chaotic, you know, with all the noise and the explosions, and so it was.
So you were in direct combat?
Yes.
Do you recall any specific incidents?
Yeah, I do, but it was pretty difficult to go through, to be honest with you.
Yep. Were there any casualties in your unit?
Yes.
Do you recall how many?
No, because when we'd lose 1 or 2 fellas, then we'd get resupplied or with new troops. So the time that I was there, we probably lost half a dozen guys, probably.
So actually, when you went there, you were a replacement for somebody that they had lost, either through
Possibly,
vacation home,
yeah,
or
or actually leaving Vietnam, yeah.
So, because it was constantly a turnover of people in your platoon, were there any of you that stayed there pretty much as a group from the start to the finish?
Yeah.
Or was it all new faces?
I know there was. I was there for 7 months with recon and got to know guys for 7 months, because there was a bunch of us that did come from Louisiana right into the same platoon, so it worked out good that way. At least I knew a few guys there for 7 months, you know.
Yeah.
But there was a constant change of faces.
Now, can you, I know off camera you told me that story about tackling your friend Melvin. Can you tell me about that incident?
Yes, we were in the middle of a firefight, and there was two fellas that were killed, and we had called in for a medevac chopper to come to pick up the men that were killed. And along with that, it was common for them, the medevac choppers, to drop off necessary supplies or ammunition or new replacements. And this particular incident, we were under heavy fire, and the helicopter hovered over the ground 3 or 4 feet, and we threw the bodies on. And Melvin, a friend of mine, Melvin Dunn, he was a new troop in country, and he had been literally kicked off the helicopter and fell down on the ground, and the helicopter took off. And only not knowing what to do, he started running in the wrong direction, and I happened to be the closest guy to him, so I ran over and tackled him and brought him back to the good side. And since then, since that event, Melvin was very close to me all the time. You know, he considered me being his savior.
Wow. So that was his indoctrination into Vietnam, to be dropped into the middle of a firefight? Was that a common thing?
Well, I don't know. It was certainly an experience for him. You know, unlike me, I had a few days in country and never got to fire my rifle for 3 months, and he comes into country for 2 days and is dropped in the middle of chaos. So I don't know how common it was, but that was the way he came in.
Wow. Would you describe a typical day for you while you were with the recon platoon? Was there a typical day? Was there, did you get up and do an 8-hour shift or a 12-hour shift, or did you sleep in the day and go out at night, or was it always so different?
The days weren't really too bad. As a matter of fact, some were quite enjoyable, because walking the mountains, we would basically sleep out in the jungle or in the highlands somewhere in our hammocks, tied from tree to tree, and have our morning breakfast or whatever we could get up, and then go for our objective for the day, which whatever distance we had to travel, we would do that and report on whatever we saw during that period of time. And most of the time it was pretty quiet. We just pick up evidence of troop movements here or there, or on occasion we'd run into a sniper, but we're of course always on the lookout for booby traps and typical hazards that you had to avoid, But for the most part, it was kind of a walk in the park, so to speak, being in the highlands, in the woods. But at the same time, you're following your training, being careful and observing. So, and then we get special missions that we'd get involved with, pulling ambushes or being requested to observe troop movements. So.
How often would you get the other special missions?
Well, it would probably be maybe every couple of weeks, something like that. We'd be doing something like that.
And would that typically be out for a longer period of time?
Yeah, we would go out for our average. We would go out for 3 to 5 days, and come back for 2 or 3 days. And if there was a heavy troop movement, then we'd actually be spending more time out and being resupplied in the field rather than get resupplied back at a base camp somewhere. But there happened to be one time we were out for 47 days without change of clothes, which was quite difficult. But
you didn't change your clothes once in those 47 days?
No.
Do you know where you were?
No, it was just before monsoon season was coming in, and we just happened to get reassigned and go here, go there, and we ended up staying out in the boonies for 47 days. So.
Now, I know you stayed in Vietnam longer than the 7 months. Where did you go after you left the recon platoon?
Well, I by luck, my friend Melvin Dunn, who I had met by accident, actually had gotten out of the field himself because his parents were both very ill, and he was assigned to the HHC Division of Intelligence, and he was constantly in touch with me, and he got a job for me as a driver for this intelligence section, and so I was happy to do that. I had to go over the chain of command to do it, but of course I was supposed to go through my captain first and to let him know that, or basically my company commander, to let him know that I was being requested by another company commander to go over for an interview, and chose not to do that. I just went over there on my own and was accepted by the commander of intelligence, and he notified my regular commander, who basically reamed me up and down for doing that, but had no choice but to let me go, and told me in short words to not to come back, so, which was okay too. But anyways, I spent my last 5 months as a driver and assistant, actually, with the intelligence commander.
How far away was the intelligence from where you were?
It was the opposite side of the base camp. LZ Bronco was a very, very large
So this was
camp.
still at LZ Bronco?
Yes.
So what was LZ Bronco like?
It was a fire support base that held the whole division, American Division, 196th and 198th Infantry Brigades. (196th, 197th, excuse me. Not 8th, 96th, 197th.
So how many personnel are we talking?
Oh, several thousand.
Oh, so this is really a huge
Oh, it's a
base.
big camp, big base, yeah.
So once you went over to the intelligence side, did you ever get back to see your former unit?
I did go over there one time, but they had been out in the field, and I never really had the time to get over there. So, but I used to keep in touch with them through mailing, and I actually sent them letters. So.
What were your duties with the military intelligence unit? As a driver, what would you do?
Well, I basically delivery man. I would take the major and all over the base camp or in through town. He would be working with village VIPs and drive him around wherever he had to go, keep the Jeep clean, and do other duties. So they keep me busy, like building bunkers or just other miscellaneous jobs, you know.
But you were the designated driver for just this one particular major?
Mm-hmm.
Do you recall his name?
No, I don't.
Now you said you also had other duties like building a bunker. Now I know you were describing to me earlier. Can you tell me about the bunker building?
Yeah, yes. This one particular project I had was to build a bunker between two large tents that we slept in, and the tents were typical size Army tents, large tents with wooden sides to them that came up approximately 4 feet. And the bunker building project, I would go every morning down to the village with my Jeep and pick up several workers at the gate. And of course we pay them like $1 a day, $1 or $2 a day. And we dug a hole to build this bunker in. The hole is approximately 10 to 12 by 8 to 10 feet wide and about 7 or 8 feet deep. And we supported that with huge timbers that were brought in by the engineering department. And the size of the timbers were 8 by 8, 6 by 6 uprights with the roofing material was 4 by 12 creosoted wood. And we reinforced that with 4-foot air-foot stripping panels on top of that with 6 layers of sandbags. And that was basically our bunker.
Wow, that was pretty heavy duty. You said you dug the hole 7 feet deep. This was all by hand?
Oh yeah, this is shovels and wheelbarrows and buckets. Yeah, of course it took probably a month to dig the hole. You know.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now, I know there was a story that went along with that bunker. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah, the bunker actually eventually got hit with took a direct hit with a rocket that was one particular evening we were getting rocketed. But as the story goes, a friend of, or should I say, another worker that was in the brigade, his name was Rocky. He was a reporter for the battalion. He was in the tent sleeping with us, and this one night he come up to me and he had this half a culver, which is a big steel part of a drain or a pipe, like a half of a steel pipe, if you will, corrugated structure, and approximately 4 feet long and 2 feet high, maybe 3 feet high, and very, very heavy, thick material. And he wanted to put it on top of the roof of the bunker. So jokingly, he was asking me where I should where he should actually locate this piece of material, this culver, sliding it to the left or to the right or back or forward, and looking over the mountains. We decided that, well, if a rocket was to come in, it would come in at a certain angle and hit the culver from where we're looking out into the mountains. Well, that particular evening, a rocket did come in. Happened to be a time-delayed rocket that hit the culver, which started the fuse on the rocket. And the rocket penetrated 6 layers of sandbags and cracked the timbers that were above our heads and saved our lives, actually, because if it wasn't for the culver, the rocket would have penetrated right through the bags and destroyed us inside the bunker. So that little jostling around with the culver saved our lives. Yeah.
And Rocky was actually sleeping in the bunker with you?
Yeah, well, actually, I was sleeping outside. When we started getting rocketed, being out coming out from the field, I was used to combat and the noise and the chaos of everything, and I would sleep through that. And when we would get rocketed on base, usually the rockets came in on the other side of the base towards the helicopter pads because they would try to knock out the helicopters. And whether this was a short round or they were trying to change their direction of attack, they started coming in around us. And I was sleeping, and everybody else was in the bunker. And Rocky actually came up and dragged me out of bed and woke me up and said, "We're getting hit." So I ran into the bunker, and I wasn't in the bunker for a minute, and the rocket hit.
Wow.
Yeah, so it was one of those times you knew it wasn't your time, you know.
Well, that was pretty close. Rocky, everybody must have loved Rocky. Where did you go after you did your 5 months at LZ Bronco as a driver?
Well, after I did my 5 months, I came home for a month.
Did you go anyplace else, or did you spend the rest of that time as a driver?
I stayed there, yep, as a driver.
So then you came home. What was it like leaving country? You went in as an individual replacement. Did you come out individually, or military transport, or commercial?
Yeah, well, I was given my DROS papers, and which was date of return papers, and I had to get from Duck Pho, which was, or LZ Bronco was in Duck Pho, to Cameron Bay, which is the area where we flew into country, by myself somehow. And so the day that I was to leave the base camp, I actually had 2 days to get to Cameron Bay, and I had just gone to the chopper pad, and we had a small airstrip on LZ Bronco too, where C-130s would come in, and I just gave them my orders that I had to get to Cameron Bay, and if there's any planes going that way, I could get a lift. And I ended up getting 2 rides, basically hitchhiking by planes to get to Cameron Bay, and made it in 1 day actually. So.
Wow. Since you had arrived in Vietnam the same day as your friend Joe and Paul, do you know if they were leaving the same day you were leaving?
Not really. I was always hoping that I would see them there, but Joe, unfortunately, was wounded after about 85 days in country. So he was in Japan at that time, healing, and Paul, I was hoping to meet him at Cameron Bay, and we actually did meet. But he had gotten there, I think, a day before me, and unfortunately left a day. Matter of fact, he left 2 days before me. So I was actually in Vietnam a year and 2 days, but I was there at a holding area waiting to catch a plane.
Did you actually get to see him and talk to him
Oh, yeah.
before he left?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we did. We probably spent a day together before he called his name first. So.
What was the feeling of leaving Vietnam?
Well, it's probably like you having a 3-day weekend, working and having that extra day, that good feeling. This was a good feeling of leaving Vietnam.
And when you returned to the United States, where did you report to?
We flew into Lewis, Washington. That was where we landed, and flew out of Fort Lewis, Washington, right to. I got a plane out of there to Kennedy Airport, and then flew a short tripper to Bradley, and I was home at 6 o'clock in the morning. But on the same day, actually, I left Vietnam on a Friday, and got on a Friday at noontime, and got to United States on a Friday at noontime, but caught the midnight flight to home, but landed in Bradley at 6 o'clock next morning. But from there, I was assigned to Fort Benning, Georgia.
Did you get to stay home for a little while before you had to report to Fort Benning?
I did. We had a month off of leave.
What was that homecoming like?
Well, the homecoming was basically me walking down the aisle terminal in Bradley Field, meeting my parents, and at 6 o'clock in the morning, which was wonderful, obviously, but that was my homecoming, which was good, don't get me wrong, but that's all it was.
And then you were home on leave. Did that mean that Paul was also home on leave at the same time?
Yes, he was. Yeah.
So what did you do in the 30-day leave before you reported to Fort Benning?
Well, I was pretty much a wreck mentally. I had a very difficult time getting back into society. Spent a great deal of that time drinking heavily. And that about sums up the first 2 weeks home. And then it was just, trying to make the best of the time I had, with the family and friends,
The world had changed quite a bit in that year that you were overseas in Vietnam. So what was your impression when you came back to the United States?
Well, Winsted was kind of unique in its own sense because there wasn't so much of the anti-sentiments that was going on, we'll say, compared to the West Coast. So we really didn't have that, that, what would you call it, disrespect, if you will. And Winsted was very welcoming and open arms and, thankful. So there was no problem here, really.
Now, while you were gone, we had the hippies, the long hair, the flower power. What was your reaction to that returning home?
Well, it was kind of sad. Here again, I wasn't really involved with it directly as far as the people objecting to me personally. And I just basically was having my own problems getting back into society, so I wasn't really too concerned, and I wasn't really worried about anybody challenging me for any reason because I was pretty much in a military mind at that time anyway, so I was prepared to deal with whatever I had to deal with,
After your leave, you reported to Fort Benning?
Mm-hmm.
For how long?
I had 5 months to do in my tour with the Army.
So did you do those final 5 months at Fort Benning?
I did.
And what were your duties there?
I was assigned to a training unit that trained officers to go to Vietnam.
What was your rank at that time?
I was Sergeant E5.
Having been in country for a year, you were well qualified. What kinds of things did you train these officers to do?
Well, a unique thing happened on the way to the base. I became very, very ill my first day there. And because of my own abuse of alcohol and also I had unknowingly picked up bloodworms in Vietnam and became very ill my first day that I had come into the Fort Benning, which happened to be a Sunday. And I was in the hospital that evening, or actually 2 o'clock in the morning, Monday morning, with very high fever, and I was in there for 2 weeks at Martin Army Hospital. So and they treated me for worms and mono. The mono part came from alcohol abuse.
Oh, so welcome to Fort Benning.
Yeah.
After your 2 weeks in the hospital, what did you do? Then did you go?
Well, then I actually was offered a week home on leave, a sick leave, and which I took that eagerly, and then came back, and I came back with what they call a permanent profile, which limited me to any type of heavy activity, which included heavy walking, running, jumping, crawling, basically exercise in general. I had to take it easy. So, which was a good thing, because it was kind of an answer to my prayers, because I didn't want to be there. The training unit was was actually a bivouac unit that spent their time out in a training area in the field in rain and the weather and mud and whatever, which I just came out of, so I didn't want to be there. So having that permanent profile limited me to that. So I ended up getting a job, luckily, as a CQ clerk, quarterly clerk, and I had to report for duty 1 night on and 3 nights off. And the night was from 4:30 in the evening, afternoon, till 7 o'clock in the morning. And basically I patrolled the building, 3-story building, and made reports every hour, and worked with a helper who was with me. And that's what I did for 5 months.
Wow. Dave, did you receive any medals or citations?
I received the kind of the generic Vietnam medals that you receive, Vietnam campaign ribbons, combat infantry badge, 2 Purple Hearts, and a couple others I can't remember really. Unit citations, things like that.
Well, I wouldn't call the Purple Hearts generic. What were the incidents you received the Purple Hearts for?
Well, one in particular, I was working with our platoon, and we were chasing some Viet Cong through an area, and one Viet Cong who had been shot several times by the helicopter that was observing the whole operation above us. This Viet Cong had gone into a cluster of rocks, and there was a tunnel under these cluster of rocks. And I didn't know he was there, and I had climbed up on these 2 rocks and observing around the area, and I didn't know he was under this formation, if you will, and he had detonated a hand grenade underneath the rocks, and which fortunately I was straddling 2 huge boulders that came together in the center, and I was directly over the center, and the hand grenade was directly underneath the 2 rocks. And when it exploded, part of the hand grenade wounded me in the arm. It just actually cut my arm a little bit, but it deafened me for 3 days, and saved other parts of my body at the same time. But once that happened, I jumped off the rock, fortunately, and went around to the other side and found the entranceway and took care of him. And the other one was, I was working in an area, it was a search and destroy mission that we were going through a village and basically burning the village down and sweeping the people out and destroying any type of materials or storage areas that contained food, etc., that would be for enemy usage. And I had a hand grenade that was of an apple. They called them apples. They were round, a newer style that they claimed had defective fuses, and to be careful, a normal hand grenade would have up to, I think, 5-second delay, and these had up to 0 to 3-second delay, but they still issued us the hand grenades. Anyways, we had loaded ourselves up with all these hand grenades, and there was a bunker that I was going to throw the hand grenade in, and I did so, but before you yell fire in a hole, and you throw your hand grenade into the area that it's going, and I just threw the hand grenade and I turned my back to run, and it exploded, and a piece of the hand grenade went through the bunker and it hit me in the back. But my first experience of that was I didn't realize I got hit by the hand grenade. I thought a rock came out and hit me, because it felt just like someone had thrown a rock and hit me right in the middle of the back. And it turned out that I felt this knock the wind out of me, and I put my hand in my back, feeling this pain, and my hand was covered with blood. So they called in a helicopter for me and dusted me off and brought me into a place, an aid station, and they took an x-ray, and I had a piece of a hand grenade that was next to my spine. So
it was actually embedded into your body?
It was in my back, yeah.
Did they remove it?
Well, they said the good thing, he says, you got a good thing and a bad thing going here. While they x-rayed me, they saw the piece of hand grenade in my back, pardon me, and they said that they would probably not attempt to take it because it was so close to my spine, and they said they were going to give it some time to see if it would work its way out. And they says, but the bad thing is they think I had TB. So I says, no, that's the good thing, because TB was my ticket out of there. And so they tested me for TB. Unfortunately, I didn't have TB, so I had to spend the rest of my tour there.
Did the piece of hand grenade ever work itself out of your back?
It did, yeah. And I never had any ill effects from it. So, matter of fact, I've had obviously several x-rays throughout my life after that, and always asked them if they saw metal back there, but no. So it apparently did, yeah.
Wow. Dave, now I'm going to ask you some questions about daily life. How did you stay in touch with your family when you were over in Vietnam?
Just by letters. And I had one opportunity to make a phone call. And I'm trying to think, I can't remember exactly what they call that, but I had to, it was all done through RTOs or radio operators way up on the hilltop, and you had like 3 minutes to talk, and they would, and the phone transmit, first I actually wrote them a letter and told them I was going to call at a specific time, and I believe it was like 4 o'clock in the morning back. It ended up 4 o'clock in the morning here. And your phone call was bounced, if you will, from ham radio operators throughout the United States till it got to your house. But it was all done by CBs, if you will, CB radio type things.
So you had one phone call while you were there?
Mm-hmm.
Were you a good letter writer?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Matter of fact, I have every letter that I sent to Vietnam. I have them. I still have them. My whole tour duty was there.
Wow. What was the food like? Now, especially like when you were in recon platoon, what did you do for food?
Well, we were resupplied or issued C rations for most of the time that I was in the field. And the C rations were canned rations that were dated back to 1947.
Give me an example of what would be in one.
Well, your main course would be slices of ham in a can, or slices of roast beef, or let's see, they had ham, roast beef, maybe spaghetti, macaroni and cheese, and then they had some like a small can of like cheddar cheese, cans of fruit, pineapple, apples, pears, things like that, and a small candy bar, and some little salt and peppers and things like that, you know.
So when you were in the field, you'd have C rations for 3 meals a day?
You could carry what you wanted to carry. I like to eat, so I carried 3 meals, yeah. Which a case of C rations weighed about 25 pounds, which is last you 4 days, I think. 12 meals, yeah. was 12 meals in a case. That was 4 days.
When you were back at LZ Bronco and at base, what did you do for food?
Well, they had a regular cafeteria or a mess tent, and there was hot food there. Wasn't much good, but it was hot food, so obviously we took care of it. And they also had milk. And
now, was it the same mess tent or a similar one when you moved to be the driver for the intelligence unit?
I know, totally different, different side of the camp, whole different mess tent.
But it would be a mess tent and you'd have 3 hot meals a day?
Yeah, yeah.
Did you always have enough supplies, ammunition, clothing, that kind of thing?
Well, yeah. The supplying system was called a DX supply system, or a direct exchange. In other words, is you would come in from a maneuver, and to get a fresh change of clothes, you'd go to a supply tent or building and make a direct exchange. You would change your clothes, the dirty ones, so they give you fresh clothes, you change and then bring the dirty ones back, and that's how you worked it. Or if you needed new boots, you'd tell them what size, you go up there, they give you a new pair of boots, you give them your old pair of boots. So you're just basically swapping old for new. So there was really no problem as far as that goes. I mean, anytime you needed something, you could get it.
Did you feel pressure or stress? Well, I'm sure you did. How did you cope with the pressure and the stress on being in country?
Well, I cried for the first 3 days, being homesick and out of fear and anxiety, and then kind of did some soul searching and made my mind up what direction I was going and what I was going to do, and kind of went that way. You know, it was a difficult first few days, especially the evenings. Daytime, we were always in training. You know, they're training us for what to watch out for, booby traps, whatever area you're going into, whatever type of work you're going to be doing. You know, the hazards of the country. You know, so. But the nights, you'd be in your tent sleeping or thinking about home, and it was difficult. You know.
Did you do anything special for good luck?
Well, I actually read the Bible.
Did you carry one with you?
A hand-sized Bible, you know, a small one. Never read the whole thing, but did a lot of praying. It was about the most special thing I did, because I wasn't really into religion that much. But it made a believer out of me.
How did people entertain themselves? When you weren't in the field and you were back at base, what did you do for entertainment?
Well, we played a lot of cards. Basically, we on a stand down, what it was called when you come back from an operation, you go into stand down. You would first shower, get clean clothes, get a hot meal, and start writing letters to home or friends. And then, as the day progressed, you'd either you could play basketball, or you know, they had little courts set there. You could bounce a ball around, or throw a ball, or play cards, or you know, socialize, tell stories, or if you could find a beer somewhere, you get a beer or soda or whatever. You know.
Did you see any USO shows?
I did. They had a couple of shows come around. LZ Bronco wasn't a really big spot for bringing in troops or shows like that, because we were in I Corps, which was close to heavy enemy concentration, so there wasn't a lot of that there, but I did get to see a couple shows on our tour of duty, if you will. Yeah.
Do you recall any of the entertainers that came over?
I never saw any.
Big name ones?
I never saw any. Actually, the only entertainment I saw was actually like Japanese singing. There would be Japanese bands playing Beatles music and things like that, you know. But I never saw any celebrities. No.
Now, I know you had said that you had a couple leaves while you were over in Vietnam. Where did you go on leave, and what other places did you see?
I went to Singapore, which is my first R&R, and basically stayed at a U.S. supervised hotel, or recommended hotel, and saw the sights of Singapore, or Bangkok, should I say. Did I say Singapore or Bangkok?
You said Singapore, which was it?
Okay, it was actually Bangkok was my first one. And, you know, toured the city of Bangkok as much as I could in 5 days, and then came back to...
Did you go on leave by yourself, or did you go with a group of guys?
We did go, a whole plane load of guys went to Bangkok, and a lot of us stayed at the same hotels. There was, in fact, I have the pamphlet, the hotel pamphlet.
Wow.
I'll show you later. But, you know, so I made friends, immediate friends on the plane there, and also theirs that we, you know, we'd go dine together somewhere or whatever.
So, first R&R was in Bangkok. Where was your second R&R?
In Singapore.
Oh, no. And what did you do there? Was it another 5-day one?
Yeah, it was another 5-day one. When I had gotten back out of the field, there was an opportunity for me to take a second R&R, which I was very happy to do. So I chose to go to Singapore on that. And basically the same thing, you know, was taking in the country sites and what was available there.
Did you travel anywhere else while you were in the service?
Not really, no. No, just the bases that I was stationed at.
Do you recall any particularly humorous or unusual events?
Well, offhand, not really. Basic training probably had most of the fun with Joe and Paul, but the rest got more intense as your time went on, although we still did manage to party some, but nothing out of the ordinary that I could really talk to you on an interview basis.
What did you think of officers, and what did you think of your fellow soldiers?
It was the fellow soldiers. Well, the officers were. I was in awe of these guys. Their leadership capabilities were impressive. Our basic training drill sergeant was just this superior individual in training with us, and we all became almost like part of his family. I mean, the way he trained you and the way he shouted commands and drilling instructions was, so we all got into it really good. I mean, we were all part of the band, if you will. I actually enjoyed it all, that part of it, you know. The camaraderism was really very tight.
Did you stay in touch with any of the friends that you met in Vietnam?
No, I haven't, other than Paul and Joe, that obviously are still here. There was only one other fella that I had visited that was in Vietnam with me, was in West Haven. I did go to visit him one time when he had gotten back. And then this other fellow, Melvin Dunn, who I had saved him running in the wrong direction when he got into country there on that firefight. Yeah. I tried looking him up, but didn't have much luck. And so I haven't really contacted anyone else.
Have you had any reunions?
I haven't gone to any. I'm a member of the Marical Division Association, and they do have periodic reunions throughout the United States, but I haven't gone to one.
Were you discharged from Fort Benning?
Yes.
So what did you do in the immediate days and weeks after you were discharged?
Well, I had hopes of taking a few months off and enjoying life, but ran into some family problems and a lack of money that I had thought was being put in the bank but wasn't, and ended up having to go to work immediately. So approximately 2 weeks after I was home from Fort Benning, I was working for an elevator company.
Wow. Now, is that the elevator company you stayed with for your entire career?
Yeah, I started with Westinghouse Elevator Company on March 10th, 1970, and basically stayed with the same company, but Schindler Elevator Company bought out Westinghouse after probably halfway through my tenure with in the business, but the work was the same. The area was the same. It was just a different company. And I spent 36 years in the business.
Wow. Did you go back to school at all on the GI Bill?
No.
Did you join any veterans organizations?
Presently, I'm with the VFW in Winstead, Post 296.
What kind of activities do you do with that post?
I'm the service officer of the post right now, and we just our intent is to keep the post running, you know, and maintaining the building and trying to do fundraisers and recruit new troops and a place that anybody can go, actually, but primarily to make it veterans of foreign wars, you know, community, you know.
Now, I understand you were instrumental in raising funds and the vision for the Vietnam Memorial that's right here in Winstead. Can
Yes.
you tell me about that?
Yeah, that was quite a unique privilege to be on the committee. It was Paul and me and several other fellows, and actually another woman that were on the committee, a veteran, all veterans, and we established a monument in town, and it was called the Vietnam Memorial, and the whole project basically was raising funds to establish this memorial, and quite a rewarding thing to go through, you know, working with the town and putting on fundraisers and establishing the monument for the town too in the park. So it was good.
Did this committee decide what the monument would look like and everything?
Yeah, well, we had actually contacted a couple of architects to give us their rendition of what a monument, or what their monument would be, and we chose one, you know, and went there and went through this the process of getting it done, you know.
So when was the monument actually constructed?
Oh God, I'm thinking 1990, somewhere around there.
And where is it located?
At the East End Park in Winstead.
Dave, how would you say that your military service affected your life?
Well, it's a complicated question, but I think it strengthened me as an individual. I think it's also created some problems in the process, but overall, I think it's made a better person out of me. About sums it up without getting too technical.
Did your military experience influence your thinking about war or about the military in general?
I would say yes, yeah. Having participated in combat, it gives you a real hands-on experience, if you will, on what war is really about, you know? So, yes, definitely.
Dave, is there anything that we haven't talked about that you can recall that you'd like to add to this interview?
If I could just say one thing with, as far as the media goes and exposure to combat, I don't think they should be doing what they're doing as far as exposing personal lives and of individuals in combat. I think a battleground is more like a holy thing, if you will, where the objective is to kill one another, and I don't think it should be exposed as it is. It's kind of a very private thing among soldiers. Neither person wants to die, but yet it's either that or survive or be killed. So it's basically something that's very sacred to me, you know.
So now are you talking about the embedded reporters they have in the present conflict?
Yeah, I don't, with all this filming of raw filming, if you will, of men being shot or wounded or severely wounded, or, you know, all this, or just showing bodies of GIs laying around, or even or other enemies. It's just, I don't think it's right myself.
The Vietnam War, in which you served, is actually the first war that brought the war into people's living rooms, and made that possible. Did you ever experience having any of the media people either with your unit or in your base or anywhere around any of the operations you worked?
Not with us. No, we worked, the recon that I was in worked as a very isolated unit. We were by ourselves most of the time, and moved very rapidly, and never had any cameramen or media with us at all.
Do you have any other memorable experiences that I haven't asked you about?
No, I don't think so. Not really.
Well, Dave, I'd like to thank you for your service to our country, and thank you for this interview.
Well, I thank you for interviewing me. It's been a privilege.